Montana Territory. June 1883. The sun had just dipped behind the Bitterroot Mountains when Isaiah Boone spotted the shape lying still by the riverbank, too still for comfort. His boots crunched the dry stones as he stepped closer, one hand resting on the worn grip of his Colt. The Clark Fork River glimmered in the fading light, and the breeze carried the scent of pine and cold water. He knelt slowly, his shadow stretching long across the silvered grass. It was a woman. She lay curled on her side, her dress torn at the hem, her bare feet scratched and dust-covered. Her dark hair spilled across her arm like spilled ink, and her breathing was shallow but steady. Isaiah's hat came off as he crouched beside her. He studied her face, pale, drawn but peaceful in sleep. She could not have been more than 20. Her arms were wrapped tight around herself like she was freezing, though the air was warm. He slid his coat from his shoulders and gently laid it over her. "You are safe now," he said, low but steady. "I swear it." She stirred at the sound of his voice, eyes fluttering open. Panic flared immediately. She tried to push herself up, breath coming fast, but her arms buckled. Hey, Isaiah said, holding his hands up. "I ain't here to hurt you. You were out cold. I wrapped my coat round you is all." Her gaze darted to the coat, then back to his face. She looked like she did not trust him. He did not blame her. "What is your name?" he asked, keeping his voice soft. She hesitated. After a long second, she answered, "Delaney Zeller." "I am Isaiah Boone. I have a cabin upriver not far. You need rest, food." "Let me help." Delaney tried to sit up again. This time she managed it, though her arms trembled from the effort. "I do not know you." "I know," Isaiah said. "But you are out here alone and something put you here. I am not asking for anything. Just let me get you somewhere safe." She looked away, her jaw tightening. Isaiah stood and took a few steps back, giving her space. "If you want to walk out of here alone, I will not stop you, but there is nothing out that way but forest and cold nights. I am offering a fire and a roof." Delaney stared at the ground. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I do not have anywhere to go." He heard something in her voice, something hollow and scraped raw. "Then come with me, just for the night." She did not answer, but she did not run either. When he offered his hand, she hesitated before placing hers in it. The trail to Isaiah's cabin was rough, winding between trees and over streams. Delaney moved slow, limping slightly, her silence thick as the dusk. Isaiah kept a steady pace beside her but did not push conversation. She was scared, that much was clear, not just of him, of everything. The cabin stood in a small clearing, smoke curling from the chimney. A corral stood empty nearby. Isaiah led her inside, lit a lantern, and set a pot of beans on the stove. He pulled a blanket from the shelf and handed it to her. She sat stiffly in the one chair by the hearth, the blanket clutched in her lap. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in every corner. Isaiah crouched by the stove, stirring the beans. "You got folks who will be looking for you," she shook her head. "No." "Where are you from?" "South of Helena." "My parents died 3 years ago. I was working at a laundry house." He waited, letting the silence stretch. After a few minutes, she said, "There was a man. His name was Clay. He followed me out after my shift, told me I owed him. I never took nothing from him, but he said I did. I ran. Been walking 2 days. Isaiah felt something cold settle in his chest. He had seen men like that. He had dealt with them before. "You are safe here," he said again. "He will not find you out here." Delaney looked at him, and this time there was a flicker of something else in her eyes. Not trust, not yet, but something quieter, maybe the beginning of it. That night, Isaiah gave her the bed and took the floor by the fire. She did not argue. She was asleep within minutes, his coat still wrapped around her. Isaiah lay on his back, watching the flames dance. He had not expected company tonight. He had not expected her, but something about her stayed with him. The way her voice cracked when she said she had nowhere to go. The way she had looked at him like she wanted to believe him, even if she could not let herself yet. He closed his eyes, one hand resting on his chest. She was safe now. That was all that mattered. The next morning, Delaney stood barefoot by the river, her hands clasped in front of her. Isaiah watched her from behind the cabin, giving her space. She had bathed, braided her hair back. She looked stronger already. When he stepped into view, she turned. "Thank you," she said simply. He nodded. "You can stay as long as you like." Her eyes searched his. "Why are you being kind to me?" Isaiah's voice was quiet. "Because someone should be." Something shifted between them then. A breath. A pause. And in that pause, something softened. She came inside with him without hesitation. By the end of the week, Delaney was chopping vegetables while Isaiah fixed the porch rail. She moved around the cabin like she had always belonged there. She still flinched at loud noises, still startled if he came up behind her too quick. But she was laughing now, sometimes. She asked about his horses. She let him show her how to hold the rifle when a bear wandered close to the creek. One night, as they sat eating side by side at the table, she looked at him and said, "I never thought I would feel safe again." Isaiah reached across the table and took her hand. "You are safe," he said, "and I will not let anyone take that from you." Delaney blinked fast, then smiled. It was the first real smile he had seen from her, and it hit him like a shot to the ribs. He was falling for her, and he could not stop it even if he tried. Isaiah came in from the lower pasture with dirt on his hands and the smell of fresh cut pine clinging to his shirt. Delaney was at the table with a spool of linen thread, mending one of his old shirts with quiet, focused fingers. The cabin was still, save the soft creak of wood and the distant warble of a meadowlark outside. He washed up at the basin, glancing over at her now and then. She didn't look up, but he noticed the slight curve of her spine as she leaned toward the light, the calm in her expression. He hadn't heard her speak since early morning. "You always sew like that?" he asked, drying his hands on a rag. Delaney paused, her needle mid-air. "How do you mean?" "Like the cloth's done you wrong," he said, a little fierce. That earned a quiet huff of breath, almost a laugh. "It relaxes me, or it used to, helps keep my hands from shaking." Isaiah nodded and took the seat across from her. "You've got a steady stitch." "I learned young," she said, tying off the thread. "Mama taught me quick before her eyesight went. After she passed, I did all the mending for the house." She folded the shirt neatly and placed it on the bench beside her. Her hands lingered over the fabric, fingers brushing the worn edge of the cuff. "Did you ever think of leaving Helena before?" he asked. "I did," she said slowly. "But I didn't have a destination, only the leaving part. I wasn't brave enough." Isaiah leaned back, studying the way the light caught in her hair. "You were brave enough to run when it counted." Delaney met his gaze then, her eyes steady. "You don't know what it cost me," he held the look. "No, but I know you didn't let it break you. That counts for more than most things." She looked down at her lap, her voice quieter. "I didn't think anyone would see it that way." Isaiah reached for the shirt she'd mended, running his thumb along the seam. "You ever think about what you'd do if you could choose now?" Delaney blinked, surprised. "I don't know. I never let myself think that far ahead." "Well, maybe it's time you did." She didn't answer right away. The silence stretched between them, not heavy, just present. Her gaze drifted to the window, where the sky was softening to evening, the pine shadows long across the clearing. "I used to want a place with a garden," she said at last. "Somewhere quiet where I could hear myself think. I wanted to grow herbs, maybe raise hens. Make things with my hands." Isaiah stood and fetched a tin mug, pouring water from the crock. He handed it to her, and when their fingers brushed, she didn't flinch. "You still can." Delaney studied the rim of the cup. "You really believe that?" "I wouldn't have said it if I didn't." She took a sip, setting the mug down with care. "You don't talk like most men I've known." "I've been living quiet for a while," he said, walking to the hearth. "Had plenty of time to think before I speak." He added a log to the fire. The crackle filled the room, warm and steady. Delaney rose and joined him. Her arms stayed at her sides, but she stood close enough he could feel her presence in the space between them. "I've been afraid of quiet," she admitted. "Afraid of what I'd hear in it." Isaiah looked at her, not past her, not through her, but at her. "Sometimes quiet's the only place a person starts to heal." She nodded slowly, eyes never leaving his. "You've been alone a long time." "Yeah." "Why?" He exhaled through his nose, glanced at the fire. "I lost someone, not to death, just lost her. She didn't want the kind of life I had to offer." Delaney's voice softened. "And you never looked again?" "I did, for a while. Then I stopped." She was quiet a long moment. "So what made you stop here that day?" Isaiah turned to her fully. "You looked like you needed someone to keep you standing, and I knew I could do that." Their eyes held. "I didn't want to need anyone," she said. "I know. But I think I might want to," she added, almost too soft to hear. Isaiah's heart beat slow and steady. He didn't reach for her, didn't move closer. Just let the words settle between them. Delaney let out a long breath, not shaky, just full. "Can I help you with the rail tomorrow?" He smiled with his eyes. "I'd like that." She nodded, then stepped back, gathering the folded shirt and heading toward the bed. She paused at the doorway, glancing over her shoulder. "I sleep better now," she said. Isaiah gave her a small nod. "Good." She disappeared behind the curtain. He stood by the hearth, the warmth soaking into his skin, and realized something had shifted again. Gently but surely, like a fence rail settling into the earth after a long winter, and he knew she wasn't going anywhere, not unless she chose to. And he'd be right here if she did. The creek behind the cabin had swelled with meltwater, running fast and clear through the trees. Delaney waded in up to her knees, skirts tied at the sides, her sleeves rolled to her elbows. The cold bit at her skin, but it cleared her head. She leaned over a shallow bend, rinsing the last of the wild onions she'd gathered from the ridge above the hollow. Isaiah watched from the bank, arms folded. He didn't call out. He just let himself take in the steadiness of her movements, the way she worked without fuss. She was different now, still quiet, still careful, but she moved like she'd made peace with the land around her. He stepped down the slope, boots crunching softly. "You ever trap before?" he asked, voice low so it wouldn't startle her. She straightened, brushing a wet strand of hair from her cheek. "Only once. Squirrel. I hated gutting it." He knelt beside her, pulling a tin pail from his side. "We'll check the snares tomorrow morning upstream. Might be muskrat. You'll like tanning better than skinning. Less blood, more patience." Delaney rinsed another bulb. "You think I'm patient? You haven't run since you got here," he said, eyes on the current. "That's something." She didn't answer right away. The river moved between them, not wide, but enough to make her think before she spoke. "I was waiting to see if the quiet was real." He looked at her, meeting her eyes. "Well," he said. Delaney stood, her skirt dripping. "It's real." Isaiah smiled, the kind that didn't reach his mouth so much as settle in his eyes. She stepped out of the water, feet bare on the mossy stones, and he offered her the towel he'd brought without a word. Later, they ate outside, sitting on the split log bench behind the cabin. The sun dipped low, gold pressing through the trees. Delaney peeled an apple with Isaiah's pocket knife, her fingers sure. He carved wood beside her, shaping a handle for the hoe she'd broken that morning. "You ever think of going back to town?" he asked after a quiet stretch. She chewed a bite of apple slowly. "Sometimes. Just to prove I could." "You don't have to prove anything." "I know," she said. "Doesn't stop the want." He nodded. "I get that. Did you ever leave this place?" she asked, once. rode south for a winter, tried ranch work in Idaho Territory, didn't take to it. Too many men crowding around one table, not enough sky. Delaney handed him the rest of her apple. He tossed the core into the brush, then looked at her. She was watching the horizon, her face unreadable. "You miss your folks?" he asked. "I miss the version of me they knew," she said. "I don't think I could be her again, but sometimes I wish she hadn't gone." Isaiah didn't press her. He reached for her hand and rested it between his own. She didn't pull away. "When I came out here," she said, "I thought I'd be alone the rest of my life. I thought that was the price of surviving. It doesn't have to be. I'm starting to believe you." They didn't move for a while. The shadows lengthened, and somewhere in the trees, a nightbird called once and then fell silent. When she leaned her head against his shoulder, he didn't speak. He just shifted slightly so she'd fit there better and let the quiet settle again. That night, as they sat on the porch with their feet bare and the stars climbing slow across the sky, Delaney turned to him. "If we built another room," she said, "maybe I could set up a drying rack. For herbs." Isaiah looked at her, not surprised, just sure. "We'll start cutting timber after first light." She smiled, this time without hesitation. "You always that agreeable?" she asked. "Only with you." She looked down at his hand resting beside hers on the step, then laced her fingers through it. "I want to stay," she said. "Not because I'm afraid to go, but because this feels like something I could choose." He turned to her fully. "You already have." Delaney leaned in, not rushed, not uncertain, and Isaiah met her halfway. The kiss was quiet, like everything between them. Certain, steady. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I don't know what comes next," she whispered. "We build it," he said. "Together." And in that moment, the past didn't press so hard on her chest. The future didn't loom so wide. There was just the warmth of his hand in hers and the steady truth of the promise he'd made by the river. She was safe, and she was loved. Isaiah woke to the scent of wood smoke and something sweet rising in the air. The light filtering through the cabin's shutters was soft with early morning. He reached for his shirt draped over the stool and shrugged it on, the floor cool beneath his bare feet. When he stepped into the main room, Delaney was at the stove, stirring a pot with one hand, her braid tucked over her shoulder and a line of flour dusting her cheek. She didn't turn when he entered, but her posture eased. "There were blackberries near the lower trail," she said. "I thought I'd try boiling them down." Isaiah leaned against the doorframe. "Smells like you're doing more than trying." She glanced over, her lips curving. "I didn't have much sugar left, just enough for a small jar. Might last a week if you don't eat it all at once." He stepped closer, peering into the pot. "Wouldn't dream of it." Delaney set the spoon aside and reached for the kettle. "I was thinking," she said, pouring water into 2 tin cups, "we could ride north this afternoon. There's an old hunter's path I saw last week. Might be good for drying herbs, flat, open, plenty of sun." Isaiah took the cup she offered. "You planning a whole apothecary out there?" "Maybe," she said, sitting down. "Or maybe I just like the idea of planting something and watching it hold." He didn't sit right away. Instead, he pulled a folded scrap of paper from the shelf above the lantern. "I've got something for you." Delaney took it carefully when he offered it. She unfolded the paper. Eyes scanning the pencil sketch a rough drawing of the cabin, the trees behind it, and a new room added on the east side. A drying rack was sketched in beside the window, with rows of hanging bundles. "You did this," he nodded. "Didn't want to start cutting until I knew where you wanted the door." She studied the lines, tracing the edge with her thumb. "You think of everything." Isaiah crouched beside her. "I think of you." Delaney drew in a breath, quiet but deep. "Most of my life I've been told what I ought to be. What I owed, where I belonged. No one ever asked me where I wanted the door." "You've got a choice now," Isaiah said, and a say in every beam we lay. She folded the paper again, slow and careful. Let's put the door facing morning. By late afternoon, Isaiah had hitched the mare and gelding, and they set off along the narrow trail north of the cabin. Delaney rode with a sure seat, her skirt pinned high, boots tucked firm in the stirrups. The trees opened into a clearing high on the ridge where the sun poured down in gold sheets. She dismounted first, walking the edge of the grass with her arms loose at her sides, eyes scanning the slope. "This'll do," she said. "Good drainage. Plenty of light." Isaiah tethered the horses and joined her. "I'll bring up lumber next week. We can frame it easy." Delaney crouched near the rock line, brushing her fingers through the soil. Rich earth. Not too rocky. He watched the way she touched the land, gentle but certain, like she was listening for something only she could hear. "You ever think about having more?" she asked suddenly. "Beyond just the garden, maybe a cow, chickens, a life that holds." Isaiah nodded. "I've thought about it. Just didn't see the shape of it until lately." She looked up at him, sun warming her face. "And now I see it clear." Delaney stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "I'd want a bench under the window. And a place to dry roots, not just leaves. We'll add it." She smiled, then stepped closer. "I want to build it all with you." Isaiah reached for her hand. "You already are." They stood there in the sunlit clearing, the wind drifting soft through the tall grass, and the shape of their future settling firm beneath their feet. Nothing rushed, nothing uncertain, just the quiet rhythm of two lives, steadying side by side. The new room took shape against the east side of the cabin, slow and true. The way Isaiah built everything with care, with his hands, and with patience carved into the grain. Delaney worked beside him most days, sawing boards, smoothing edges, and setting beams while the light poured in through the trees behind them. Her palms had blistered and toughened. She didn't complain. Neither did he. By mid-July, the roof sloped clean and tight, the window frame fitted, the walls sealed with clay and moss they'd gathered near the creek bend. When the last plank was set, Isaiah stood back, rubbing the back of his neck as he studied it. "You sure you want your bench right there?" he asked. "Could still shift it left, catch more of the sunrise." Delaney leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, a streak of dried mud on her skirt. "No, I want to see the slope where the wild mint grows. That's the spot." He nodded once. "All right, then. We'll build it strong." They didn't speak for a while, just stood in the doorway of the new room. The scent of sap and sun warmed pine thick in the air. The sky was heavy with heat, the insects low and lazy. Delaney stepped inside, pressing her hand to the eastern wall. "I never imagined I'd have a place that was mine by choice." Isaiah followed her in, his boots quiet on the packed earth floor. "It's ours now. Every nail, every board, you made it so." She turned to face him. "Do you ever want more than this?" He took his time answering. "Not more, just deeper. A life that stays, one that doesn't shift beneath you when the wind rises." She nodded slowly. "I've never had that." Isaiah reached up and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You've got it now." She didn't look away. "I want to marry you, Isaiah. I don't want to wait through another winter wondering if I deserve it." His hand dropped to hers, steady. "You don't have to wonder. I've wanted the same since the first time you laughed near the fire." Delaney's breath caught, but she didn't cry. She just gripped his fingers tighter and said, "Then let's make it real." They married 3 days later, under the cottonwoods near the riverbank. Isaiah trimmed his beard for the first time in years. Delaney wore a cream-colored dress stitched from fabric she'd traded for with wild onion and dried berries. A traveling preacher passing through from Missoula spoke the words. Their vows were quiet, but firm. Isaiah's voice didn't waver when he said, "I will carry the weight with you." Delaney's thumb brushed the edge of his calloused palm when she said, "And I will rest beside you." Afterward, they shared bread and smoked trout with the preacher and his wife, then walked home in the deepening light, hand in hand, the stillness around them broken only by the soft rustle of evening settling over the trees. That night, they lay in the new room, her head on his shoulder, her hand resting over his heart. The wall behind them still smelled of fresh-cut timber, the open window let in the hush of crickets. "You think we'll still be here in 20 years?" she whispered. Isaiah kissed the top of her head. "If you want to be, I do." The wind moved gently through the trees. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in her life, she didn't brace herself against sleep. She welcomed it. Years passed, and the land grew with them. The herb room filled with jars and bundles, each labeled in Delaney's careful hand: yarrow, horehound, elderflower, sweetgrass. Locals began to ride in from as far as Stevensville to trade for tonic or balm. Delaney never asked for coin. Only what could be spared: a cut of cloth, a few eggs, a measure of barley. Isaiah's hands stayed strong. He built a new chicken coop, fenced the west pasture, and taught a neighbor boy how to mend a roof in the spring thaw. He never raised his voice, but people listened when he spoke. They never spoke again of the men who hurt her. They didn't have to. That ache had been outgrown like an old coat left behind in the shed. One autumn, Isaiah carved a cradle from juniper, sanded smooth and shaped with long hours. When he brought it into the cabin, Delaney stood beside the hearth, one hand on the swell beneath her dress, and smiled without a word. Their daughter was born in November, when the snow had just begun to fall. Delaney named her Ruth after her mother. Isaiah held the child in both hands, his eyes damp, his voice low when he said, "She's got your quiet." Delaney kissed his brow. "And your steadiness." They raised her with the same love they built the cabin from, measured deep and without condition. Ruth learned to walk beside the river, learned to read by the fire, learned to live by watching how her parents moved through the world. Honest, kind, and unyielding when it mattered. In the evenings, Isaiah would sit on the porch bench he'd built long ago, Ruth on his knee, Delaney beside them with her mending. He'd tell stories of the day he found her by the riverbank, how the world had tilted in that moment and never righted since. Delaney would hum beneath her breath, the same tune she'd carried since girlhood, and Isaiah would watch the light shift in her face and think, "This is the life I wanted. This is the life we made," and it stayed that way, quiet and full. No more running, no more fear. Just love, rooted deep in the Montana earth, lasting as long as the pines.